The call came in on a Tuesday. I know that for a fact, because Tuesdays were Salisbury steak days in the mess tent, an unspoken punishment everyone agreed must be payback for some shared, unidentified sin. I was stationed at a forward operating base in a country whose name tasted like grit and smoke, a place where the sun leached color from the sky itself. The air felt like a blast furnace, and the background noise was a relentless grind of generators, far-off rotor blades, and the voices of men stranded far from anything that felt like home. Home, just 4 letters, but heavy enough to carry a lifetime. It was the cool limestone steps of the porch, the smell of bluebonnets after spring rain, the familiar squeal of the screen door as it swung shut. It was 100 acres of Texas land my grandfather had bought with his discharge money. The ranch house my father and I had raised with our own hands, beam by beam, long before I ever found myself in this bleached wasteland of sand and hostility. Out here, memories of home were the only solid things left, a mental stronghold against everything that threatened to crack you open. The satellite phone vibrated, a thin, electronic buzz that sliced through the noise like a blade. I glanced at the screen. Bill Henderson, my neighbor, a retired mechanic with permanently oil-stained hands and a heart as wide as the Texas sky. "Jake, that you?" His voice was stretched in across 7,000 miles of ocean and desert. "Bill, everything okay?" I pictured him on his porch swing, iced tea sweating in his hand, his old bloodhound Gus snoring at his feet. I don't rightly know how to say this, son. There was a long pause, filled with static and the quiet sound of the world continuing on without me, around me. The clatter of trays and conversations slowly faded, my universe shrinking until it was just that small plastic phone against my ear. "I thought maybe you'd rented the place out," he finally said. "For the money?" I gave a short, sharp laugh. "Rented it? Bill, I'm not that hard up." "Why?" "Because Jake," he said, his voice dropping low and serious, sending a chill through me despite the heat. "There are people living in your house." The tray in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The Salisbury steak sat there in an obscene brown heap. This had to be a joke. A bad one, but a joke. "That's a good one, Bill. You almost got me." "This ain't a joke," he snapped, every trace of humor gone. "I'm dead serious. A family moved in last Saturday. Big U-Haul truck. The whole deal. There's a minivan in your driveway. Furniture on your porch. Their kids are splashing around in your pool. Hell, Jake, I saw a locksmith's van there Monday afternoon. They changed the locks on your front door. The tray slipped from my numb fingers and crashed onto the concrete. The noise of the mess hall rushed back, but it sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. My ranch, my home. A cold dread, colder than any desert night, poured through my veins. They changed the locks. The words echoed inside my skull, so final, so casually violating. It stole the air from my lungs. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Don't know their names," Bill said, and I could hear anger simmering beneath his words. Standing in for my own. The woman was out there bossing movers around. When I walked over the fence to ask what the hell was going on, she told me to mind my own damn business. Said they had a lease. Said it came from the HOA. The Homeowners Association. A nest of busybodies. I paid $200 a year, so they could complain my grass was half an inch too tall. While I was deployed, they declared my place abandoned under some obscure clause buried in paperwork I'd never bothered to reread. A so-called community emergency housing policy. They'd lease my home to the cousin of a board member. Betrayal is a familiar presence on the battlefield, but this was something else. This wasn't strategy or survival. This was desecration. I wasn't just angry. Anger burns hot and clean. This was a cold, grinding rage that settled into my bones and refused to move. I started making calls. I burned through an entire international phone card. I reached the Red Rock County Sheriff's Department, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the phone. A weary deputy listened, sympathy clear in his voice, but his answer was pure procedure. "I understand, Sergeant. I really do," he said. "But without you physically here to file a report, to sign an affidavit, it's a civil dispute. There's nothing we can do." My final call was a desperate one, to the HOA president herself, Karen Miller. Her voice was a weapon, dripping syrupy concern and condescension. "Oh, the Turner property," she crooned after I explained, my jaw tight. "Yes." The board was terribly worried. It appeared abandoned, mail piling up, becoming quite an eyesore. According to our bylaws, Section 4, Article C. I cut her off. "I'm on active military deployment. The Service Member Civil Relief Act protects my property." "Oh, I'm sure it does," she said, suddenly sharp and dismissive. "But our community initiative takes precedence in cases of neighborhood blight. We placed a lovely family there. They're taking excellent care of the home. They have a legally binding 1-year lease." "I'll be home in 3 weeks," I said quietly. "That house had better be empty." She laughed, a sound like ice cubes thrown into a garbage disposal. "You'll need to discuss that with our legal counsel. Have a safe tour of duty." The line went dead. The final weeks of deployment dragged on longer than any I'd ever known. The rage didn't fade. It cooled, hardened, and compressed into a dense core of purpose in my chest. I patrolled. I cleaned my rifle. I stood watch. And with every hour, the image of strangers sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, using the coffee mugs my mother had painted grew sharper. I remembered the day my father and I finished the porch, sitting on the steps with lemonade as the sun dipped low. He'd rested a hand on my shoulder. "A man's home is his kingdom, Jake," he'd said. "Don't ever let anyone take it from you." The flight home took 18 hours of controlled restraint. When the wheels finally hit American soil, the first breath of humid Texas air felt different. It wasn't relief. It was something else entirely. It was a breath of war. I didn't call my family. I didn't reach out to any friends. I walked straight past the cheering crowds and the bright welcome home banners, found a quiet corner of the airport, and made my first call to Marcus Cole, my former platoon sergeant. "Jake, heard you were inbound. Welcome home, brother." "Good be back, Mark," I said. Then I got to it. "Listen, I've got a situation. A personal mission. I need a fire team." There was no pause. No questions about what kind of mission it was. No concern over legality or consequences. Just the unshakable loyalty of men who had already walked through hell together. "You got it," he said immediately. "Who do you need, Diaz?" "Smith." "Both." "Meet me at the old 24-hour diner off Route 79. 0400 tomorrow. We'll be there." The line went dead. The diner was a fluorescent island in the pre-dawn darkness, reeking of stale coffee and burnt bacon. They were all there, already seated in a corner booth, a quiet pocket of disciplined stillness. Marcus sat with his massive frame hunched slightly forward, his calm presence more intimidating than any raised voice. Diaz, our former combat medic, lean and alert, watched everything without seeming to look at anything. And Smith, our breacher, built like a vending machine and just as immovable. We exchanged brief greetings, firm handshakes, short nods, coffee that tasted like asphalt. I laid out the situation in a voice stripped flat of emotion. When I finished, silence settled over the table like a weight. Finally, Marcus leaned in, wrapping his big hands around his mug. "So let me get this straight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "While you were overseas getting shot at, a committee of suburban housewives stole your house and handed it to some cousin. That's the long and short of it." Smith cracked his knuckles, the sound like rocks grinding together. "What's the ROE, Jake?" "Rules of engagement." "Rule 1, I said, meeting each of their eyes, "we don't break anything. Rule 2, we don't touch anyone. Rule 3, we stay calm. We stay polite. We stay professional. We're not here for a fight. We're here to facilitate a peaceful and immediate evacuation of unauthorized personnel from my property." A slow grin spread across Diaz's face. Peaceful and immediate evacuation. I like it. We rolled down the county road in a convoy of 4 unremarkable heavy-duty trucks, parking a quarter-mile from the entrance to my ranch, hidden by a stand of live oaks. The sun was only a thin, bloody promise on the eastern horizon. I lifted my binoculars and surveyed my home. The violation hit like a punch to the chest. The porch light was on, throwing a sickly yellow glow. Cheap floral curtains hung in the windows. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney my father and I had built stone by stone. Children's toys littered the yard like candy-colored shrapnel. A garish striped hammock sagged between the 2 pecan trees my grandfather had planted when he came home from his war, an act of hope and faith in a future he believed in. Now it was just somewhere for a stranger to nap. "Let's go," I said. We moved up the long gravel driveway on foot, our boots crunching in near-perfect unison. The sound felt deafening in the pre-dawn stillness. Every step was reclamation. This was my land, my home. The porch boards creaked beneath our weight, a familiar sound that felt wrong in this moment. I didn't hesitate. I raised my fist and knocked on my own front door. 3 sharp, solid raps that echoed through the quiet. Silence followed, thick with tension. Then came the sound of a lock turning, new, unfamiliar. The door creaked open, and a man I'd never seen before stood there, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mid-40s, soft face, unkempt hair. He was wearing my favorite red flannel shirt. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered, eyes still foggy. I didn't raise my voice. I kept it flat, cold as a wet stone. "I'm the owner." His expression shifted instantly, confusion giving way to a smirking arrogance. He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms inside my flannel. "Oh," he said, "you must be the soldier guy the HOA mentioned." He said soldier like it was something dirty. "Yeah, they said you abandoned the place. We're renting now." I didn't wait for permission. I stepped past him, crossing the threshold into my own house. He sputtered, "Hey, you can't just..." But the words died when Marcus, Diaz, and Smith filled the doorway behind me, for silent, imposing shapes that blocked out the dawn. Every inch of my house made my blood boil. The smell was wrong. Stale cigarette smoke mixed with the sugary stench of a cheap plug-in air freshener. The furniture had been rearranged. My leather armchair was shoved into a corner, magazines piled on the seat. The family photos that had lined the mantel for generations were gone, replaced by a ceramic dolphin and a framed photo of this man's smiling family. The American flag that had draped my father's coffin, the one for my unit, folded carefully in a triangular case, had been taken out and left crumpled on a bookshelf. My eyes swept the room, cataloging the desecration. Then they landed on my mother's glass-front curio cabinet. Inside, among her porcelain birds, sat something new, a half-empty bottle of nail polish. And beside it, something was missing, a small silver locket. It wasn't worth much in dollars, but it was the last thing my father had ever given her before he died. A cold, razor-edge fury cut cleanly through the rage. I turned toward the man now standing awkwardly in the middle of the living room, his earlier swagger draining into nervous uncertainty. From somewhere down the hallway, a woman's shrill voice rang out, sharp with irritation. "Todd, who is it?" "Tell him to go away." "You need to gather your family and leave," I said, my voice dangerously calm. He crossed his arms again, a weak attempt to reclaim control. "I'm not going anywhere. I've got a lease." "You got a piece of paper?" I replied, stepping closer. "A fraudulent document signed by criminals. This is my house. You are trespassing." His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the cops. I'll tell them you broke in." "Good," I said evenly. "Do it. Tell them to send Sheriff Daniels." Minutes later, a county patrol car rolled up, its lights flashing without sound. Deputy Miller, the same young officer I'd spoken to on the phone, stepped out, his hand hovering near his sidearm. He looked uneasy, clearly out of his depth. Todd rushed onto the porch, waving his leash like a life raft. "Thank God, officer. These men broke in. They're threatening my family." Deputy Miller's eyes flicked from Todd's frantic face to the 4 of us standing still and immovable. "Sir," he said to me, voice tight, "I'm going to need you to step outside." Before I could respond, gravel spat beneath tires as a second vehicle pulled into the driveway, a large black SUV. Sheriff Daniels stepped out. He was tall and weathered, a man who looked like he'd been carved straight from Texas earth. He settled his hat, took an entire scene in a single glance, and walked past both Todd and the deputy without slowing. He stopped in front of me. "Jake," he said, voice low, "welcome home. Looks like you've got a pest problem." Something like that, Sheriff. Before another word could land, a third car screeched behind the SUV, a spotless white Lexus. Karen Miller climbed out, dressed in a pink tracksuit, her face twisted with furious entitlement. Sheriff Daniels, what is the meaning of this? I am the president of the HOA, and Mr. Collins here is a legal tenant. The sheriff turned slowly. For the first time, I saw real cold anger in his eyes. Karen, he said flatly, you are the subject of an ongoing investigation for fraud. You are now under arrest for conspiracy, illegal eviction, and theft of a federal serviceman's property. He produced a warrant from his jacket. Deputy Miller, secure Mrs. Miller, then supervise the removal of these individuals from this property. Her makeup cake face collapsed on itself, the color draining to a sickly gray. The eviction that followed was frantic and pitiful. As Todd and his wife scrambled to shove belongings into boxes, my men and I began the slow, deliberate work of putting things right. Furniture went back where it belonged. Their curtains came down. Diaz, who'd picked up a few useful skills over the years, started replacing the locks yet again. While checking the master bedroom for anything else out of place, Diaz found it, my mother's silver locket, hidden inside the wife's jewelry box. I took it from him, its familiar weight cool against my palm, and stepped outside as my vision blurred, anger and relief tightening painfully in my throat. By noon, they were gone. The house was quiet again, but it felt wounded, like something sacred had been violated. Late that afternoon, the sheriff returned. We executed the warrant at Karen's house, he said, sipping the iced tea I'd offered. Found a ledger. She was running the scam on a dozen properties, deployed soldiers, elderly folks in nursing homes. Forged documents. The whole board's in custody. The story went national. My quiet ranch became a backdrop for news vans and shouted questions over the fence. Veterans groups reached out, their outrage fierce and humbling. Under the weight of lawsuits and scandal, the Red Rock County HOA was dismantled entirely. Karen Miller and her circle were convicted on multiple federal charges. She got 15 years. Over the next month, my real community showed up. My platoon brothers came out on weekends. We repainted the house inside and out, scrubbing away every lingering stain. We built a stronger front gate, steel and solid oak. Bill Henderson helped me get my old truck's engine running smooth again. Slowly, carefully, the wounds healed. One evening, I sat on my porch in my own armchair, watching the sun slide behind the hills, bruising the sky purple and orange. Crickets filled the air. A cold beer rested in my hand. Out front, my unit's flag fluttered gently on the pole where it belonged. The peace was deep, the kind you only understand after it's been taken and won back. Sheriff Daniels' SUV rolled up. He tipped his hat. You all good now, Jake? I took a long drink and looked out over my land. My kingdom's better than ever, Sheriff. Feels like home again. He smiled. Figured it would. Guess Karen and her friends didn't realize who they were messing with. I grinned. The first easy, genuine grin I'd had in months. No, sir. They didn't pick the wrong house. They picked the wrong soldier. He laughed, deep and full, before driving off into the fading light. As his taillights disappeared down the long road, I looked across the field my family had worked for 3 generations and felt a certainty settle deep in my soul. This place was more than land and lumber. It was part of me, and no one would ever take it from me again.